Hello, everybody. This is the first pre-recorded mini lecture that we're going to do for the beginning of week 4 and the very end of training camp. So I'm going to start by reviewing some of the stuff that we talked about on last Wednesday on the 22nd. So I'll share screen and just try to kind of trot through the rest of this PowerPoint. So towards the end of class on Wednesday, we covered some of Bauman's key concepts. So talked about his biography, skipped over this a little bit, just talking about structuralism and social structures in general. Then we talked about solid modernity, so kind of thinking about a factory, like a lot of people doing very specific tasks, uh, kind of like what Emil Durkheim would consider organic solidarity. So people in a division of labor doing stuff really, really efficiently. And in liquid modernity, if we look at Durkheim's idea of organic solidarity, there's still a lot of variety, a lot of division of labor, but people are less specialized, I guess. They have to change and be adaptable to shifting demands in the labor market and the job markets. So we see that there's these examples comparing a factory, long jobs where people are, employers are uh, reliant on workers in one locality if they have invested in a factory or in their means of production, to use Marx's terms. And then this video was from kind of like a human resources company or uh, medical billing, Epic, and they were talking about being a project manager. And it's like 7 minutes of just to my ears and brain, it sounds like pure jargon. Just be a high performer, blah, 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 blah. It is unclear what exactly people are doing other than listening to instructions of how to cut costs, oftentimes by relaying costs onto patients or onto providers rather than the insurance companies. So this is one example of in liquid modernity of how it's defined by a much more common word. So liquid modernity is right here. This is full screen now. I should have been doing that the whole time. My apologies. So this is what we're talking about with liquid modernity. But neoliberalism is a concept you hear much more commonly. So in probably most sociology classes and political studies classes, people are going to be talking about neoliberalism, also gender studies, ethnic studies, Black studies, a lot of conversation about this kind of insidious ideology. It's an ideology that supports the privatization of the economy. So instead of having public anything, any public goods, neoliberal ideology advocates for freedom of capital to control everything. So instead of having kind of democracy or public control of anything, neoliberal ideology advocates for everything to be privatized. Um, what we mean by capital is money or property that can be invested for something. So it's not necessarily capital to have a blender in your house if you're not selling the smoothies you make with that blender. But if you use the blender to sell smoothies, then all of a sudden that blender is kind of a little piece of property you have because it can help you make profit. So that's the distinction between capital and just other property you might have. So capital, when looked at as a whole, not just what individuals have, it is something that accumulates and kind of is just a number obsessed with getting bigger. So capital in an ideal sense is invested, and what it gets invested in creates a surplus product, stuff beyond what it cost in the initial investment, so that uh, the owner of that capital makes a profit. And in neoliberalism, this thing, capital, is prioritized above any other social needs, like having a healthy society, combating diseases, helping people be safe, reducing crime, and the like. It's just capital is this sort of unidirectional ideal, and it's the end and the means of a neoliberal society. Of course, we don't live in a perfectly neoliberal society. We have roads, we have parks, we have tons of things that are public and people can access. And even when we go into semi-public places like a shopping mall or a university, we can walk around fairly freely. Maybe, to take a class and get a degree, you have to pay tuition, which is really sad. And we should have public college. Shopping mall, I don't think is ever going to be perfectly public, where you just like go in a mall and you have like a set amount of spending power. I don't think we're going to live in such a socialist or communist society ever. I think, for certain things, markets and the profit motive kind of works, but for things that maybe are more of like a public provision, neoliberalism gets in the way of people being able to enjoy those things. So neoliberalism as an ideology promotes reduced taxes on corporations and cutting of public social spending. In effect, this is a redistribution of wealth and resources from working people to investors. So working people have a set wage, and then companies will make as much surplus value as they can, sell the products for as much as they can, beyond what it costs to produce them, and profit gets increased even more when companies don't have to pay as much taxes, or the wealthy individuals taking, they're seeing their own net worth increase when the companies they own get more valuable. If they have lower taxes or no taxes, then that just increases the capital that they can accumulate and invest further, to get more capital. But again, there's no ideal beyond just an increasing number, and then this hope that indirectly maybe that increasing number could trickle down into some goods. But Bauman is critical of this neoliberal perspective, and that's why he comes up with the fancy term liquid modernity to describe kind of the instability and the way that nothing is really guaranteed for people in an individualized liquid modern world that we're in. So he's arguing that neoliberalism makes individualization even worse by placing the burden of economic success squarely on individuals. And so this process of individualization, I know I read the quote out loud during class. In short, it's people having to keep themselves alive through luck, through effort, through hard work, through sacrifice. So some people might just be born wealthy and then that box is checked and they move on to other individual wants, needs, and desires, maybe motivated by an ego or a goal, to reach for. And sometimes people feel a sense of meaninglessness in this individualized society, because if all you're working towards is making your own situation better and better and better, it doesn't necessarily map onto human psychology. We've kind of existed for thousands and thousands of years as humans, as a social species. It's doing stuff together and really condemning in our groups anybody who is over the top in terms of their self-interest or greed. So in an individualized society, freedom is constrained by the economic situation any individual is in. You can't buy everything in the world. You have a certain amount of spending power, a certain amount of time in a day where you can work and earn money too. So this creates a tight working environment where there's toxic competitiveness, creating problems like a lot of stress, a lot of confusion and uncertainty in terms of if you're going to be able to live in the same area for a long time or not. That can lead to health problems itself, but also in terms of social dynamics, it creates an atmosphere where people are not as trusting of each other as they could be under different conditions. And just a reminder, individualization is something that we're talking about now, is something occurring to a society where the people in the society are more self-reliant. Individualism is an ideology where people celebrate self-interest, and you can sometimes hear the word individualize mean to like when someone's making an effort to make something more unique. I'm making painting a design on a plate or something, and I want to individualize the design on the plate. I can draw something totally unique on it or something. But when we're talking about it in this class, we're talking about society. So this insecure environment, people need to work really unpredictable short-term jobs to make an income, and they have to use their income to meet all their needs, including this list that I have under the first bullet point. And people, even though they have to work, their contributions to the economy are increasingly performed through their consumption, what they buy and choose to buy. And that's what actually benefits the economy, is creating demand for certain consumer goods. And people's incomes are produced just in less reliable ways, filling in the cracks for short-term production cycles or selling goods and services such as marketing, advertising, creating these kind of artificial needs and desires in people's hearts and minds. So the dynamic of freedom and constraint is always there, where there's a lot of choices. Like I had the example during class of you can choose a gazillion different flavors of cereal, but you're not going to buy all those flavors. Social bonds in an individualized society, just like you might imagine, are weaker. People are not going to be friends or partners with each other for quite as long as traditionally they may have been. And relationships are until further notice. You can read Bauman saying that phrase a lot when talking about an individualized society. So if a relationship is no longer really useful for both people, then either one can just move on, even if it's just in a friendship or an acquaintanceship. So there's been maybe a forgetting of, and this is something that could be studied empirically, have people actually forgotten the value of the intrinsic value of interpersonal relationships, not just to get something from somebody, but intrinsically, just that it's good to be connected and it feels good to sustain our friendships and even our acquaintanceships and loose ties, and especially our family relationships. I would argue that it just feels good to be connected, and the sociology, the part of sociology studying health, medical sociology, would back up that claim, because when we're more socially connected, we're more resilient, we can fight off diseases better. All right, so I'm gonna make a new video here. So stop share. This was just the beginning of these slides, and now I'm gonna start talking about individual chapters of the individualized society. Thank you for tuning in to this initial pre-recorded video.